Welcome to the What I Meant to Say podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, founder of Be Better Media and a mom of four, passionate about human connection. Some of these stories contain sensitive content about real life events, and all of the information in this podcast and from anywhere on the Be Better Media website is for informational purposes only. If you find that you need help, which we all do from time to time, please reach out to a licensed professional for help. Naffele Nikita is a conscious creator living on the Canadian border with a perspective on what it means to be an independent thinker in an increasingly polarized world. Our conversation started around the state of news and the media in both of our countries and progressed to a level of understanding that I knew needed to be captured in a What I Meant to Say conversation. Her understanding of how truth and perspective are two sides of the same coin is one that the world needs to hear. And I'm excited to bring this conversation from a grounded and open-minded human to my listeners. I am so excited to have a conversation today with Naffele Nikita. She is in Canada, and our conversation started because we both are associated with Shift Adapt and Brian McKenzie and got to know his work, and we met through that and started having some great offline conversations. So thank you for joining me today to have an online conversation on what I
thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about where you're from and what you do every day.
Okay, so I live in Canada, as you said, and I'm actually in a border town. So just a little small town just outside of Windsor, which is across from Detroit. So it's been, I think, interesting growing up in a border city, most of my life. And there's a lot of American influence there, which I feel like has probably in many ways, been instrumental to a lot of things or just different impacts and measurement. That could be one, Fahrenheit, Celsius thing, just small things like that. Whereas certainly if you move away from the border, you'll notice people in other cities and towns, they don't use Fahrenheit, they use Celsius. And so just one small little thing. And yeah, I've been in fitness a lot of my life. That's been a very big part for me all of my life. And I've recently moved back to my smaller town at the end of 2019. So kind of just
Okay.
before everything changed for everybody. So, which
Yeah.
was certainly a blessing in disguise, which I wouldn't have
Oh,
known. Nobody knew what was coming because I had been a gym owner. I owned a CrossFit gym.
okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So were you an athlete growing up?
Yes, always very athletic. Not, I would always say, but I didn't compete at super high levels, However, I figure skated from grade 2 till grade 12, and that was competitive. So, on the ice 4, 5 days a week sometimes, skating throughout the summer, on Saturdays sometimes. Uh, After, I would say once that probably finished when I did a few student exchanges in high school. It was sort of like you don't have time to do every single thing, every activity. But I played soccer throughout high school, and I think probably as an adult, once you shifted out of school, probably like many people who have played competitive sports, you're a little bit at a loss. Like, what do you do with all your time now?
Yeah.
And so I feel like whether or not you were at a super elite a level, I think the fact of the matter is you still invested your time into that thing that you did
Oh, for
for a
sure.
decade.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think I eventually I found karate. So I did martial arts for many years. And then I found CrossFit, and that became the love of my life. And
I can totally identify
mhm,
with, and we've only had, just a few conversations, but I can identify with what you're saying so much. I've done, master swimming and played beach volleyball and, look for ways to run, half marathons and just look for ways to compete. And I think I totally agree with you that like when you grow up with that, that competitive spirit and you grow up and you learn that discipline through sports, I think
mhm,
it's super helpful to continue that through life. And I think we look for ways to do that. So the CrossFit thing, I've watched a lot of people do. I haven't done CrossFit, but I've seen how, competitive spirits really fall in love with that game. And so
yes.
is that how you got to know Brian McKenzie's work?
A little bit, yes. I actually probably owning the gym was a relatively short period as far as I guess business or gym ownership goes. I had the gym for 13 months, and it was I could say a disastrous
Mm.
experience. However, it was the lesson that I needed. And I knew that in the moment, but you're still trying to process everything in real time as well as, triage and put fires out and just,
Yeah.
survive. I found Brian a little bit, I would say into 2020, I found him. And just being, curious in nature, I had known that I was beyond burnt out. I knew that I had, if you want to call it adrenal fatigue or insufficiency, I knew that there was an issue. And I knew that at the beginning of buying the gym. However, then, as everything kind of fell apart and everything, like all the wheels sort of came off the cart, so to speak, there just came a point where I certainly knew that I wasn't really going to be able to fix myself physically or emotionally while I was still in that situation. So I knew it was a matter of biding my time till I could sell the gym and remove myself. And then a few months later, as I was just trying to find more information about how to help this situation out, everything that I read really just kept talking about parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system. And of course, you can't really have that discussion of talking about those two, topics without incorporating the breath. And so it was sort of like all that information led to breath work. And I was very curious. And I think, it's just the right thing at the right time. A friend probably posted a video of Brian and immediately went to the website, probably read every single link or article or video, checked out his Instagram, and I spent weeks probably divulging and
Yep.
dissecting and absorbing all of the information until then I thought, yeah, you know what, I think that's the guy. Like you just need to invest in myself and work with someone else because I also knew that probably taking some pills, like if I just went to a doctor, I didn't think pills were going to be the right answer either for
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So it's not that I was going to be against it. I'm like, I just don't think that that's the path or the avenue really that I needed to take. So
Yeah.
it's
So tell me, once you started working with them, how did you see improvements or how fast, through what you learned?
sure. Yeah. It was really interesting because when you're having calls and working with someone one on one, which I know that you've done in the
Yeah.
mentorship group as well, you sort of only divulge certain little tidbits of information, right? Like sort of whatever's relative to what you're speaking about today. So you don't cover every single aspect of your life, right? And I don't know if then he even recognized like how physically bad I did feel when I started working with him. So I think we started working together in the summer. I'm gonna say like June, probably like late spring, early summer of 2020. And at that point in time, I was not able to do any type of physical workouts anymore. Like it had come to that point for me that I couldn't do a set of air squats without feeling beyond crushed for days, like feeling
Oh,
like I was injured. And so that was really devastating for me considering, you're totally pulling out all the used tos and should be's and like I used to squat this or I should be doing this. And that was really a hard pill to swallow because now you're like, I can't do anything.
yeah.
I can't do anything without being crushed. And so that was, yeah, really devastating. And so I started walking. That was what he gave me to do, walking. I wasn't even able to follow their shift programming. It
Wow.
wasn't even until 2021, January of 21, that I actually felt well enough to commit to that 3 days a week. And I was like, oh, you can only do 2 or 3 days a week. But, I could see I stuck with the walking, even though at the time to me, walking was not exercise. That was,
Well,
you know,
yeah, and isn't that such a different thing? Like when you have a story in your head that you're reinforcing, right? And that's so much of what Brian and Emily teach is what's that story that you what's the narrative that you're putting to what's going on, right? And so if you're beating yourself up that this is just walking and it's not a workout,
this is what old people do. They go for walks.
Yeah. It's torturous,
but like
right?
I'm good at handstand push-ups. I'm good at ring dips, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm only 5 feet tall. So if we were at like a CrossFit competition, people would often think, "Oh, did you do gymnastics?" Because that's kind of then what I looked like. I'm short, so you look like a little gymnast. And
we're a foot apart.
Yeah, I figured that when I kept seeing all your volleyball things, and like volleyball, basketball, those were not my sports at all. Yeah. So I tried to get out of those, but
I got kicked out of gymnastics, so it's okay. So in all, when you said you stayed with the walking, and then you got eventually to the shift program. What did you figure out in the meantime about what took you from CrossFit Games and where you were competing to being so fatigued and unable to work out?
Well, and so just to be clear, I didn't compete at the CrossFit Games.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't.
Okay.
Case this.
No, you said you would come,
live.
but I know
I went as a spectator. Yeah, but I certainly competed in local competitions around, my area. I competed as a masters athlete. So that was, kind of feeling like something to be proud of. And so, which I can still be proud of it. It was pretty cool. Like I did some cool things. It just, I think it finally, it was a total step back, because for even for a year, there'd be times, you're looking at the programming and seeing a squat. And in my mind, you're like, well, you're not squatting 175 today. You're lucky if you can do 75 pounds. And it took a long time. And now I'm at a point where, because I think I was having to constantly scale everything. It was like the weight, sometimes the movements, sometimes the amount of reps. But then I finally just told myself, yeah, but you're a coach also. Coach yourself. What would you tell, like, if I was a brand new person, or if my parents joined the gym, or a friend who's never ever done these types of things and they didn't have an athletic background, how would I coach that person? Would I make them feel bad because they're not doing 21 thrusters? They're just going to do 21 air squats? No, like that's where they are today. And so it was really, creating a whole new story for myself, and how would I coach myself? And you certainly, I think, eventually catch yourself on where are you coming up with this negative self-talk, or because that's not how you would coach somebody else. It's not how you would talk to someone else.
And being that kind to yourself rather than motivating someone else is often so much harder. Did Brian help you create those reframes?
I think, yeah, definitely. That there was, a lot of old stories which we've probably visited a number of times, especially now that it's been 2 years of working together. But I can certainly see, different layers of those stories. And I think, and you had asked, how did I maybe like come to that position of being, so burnt out. That was probably in the works for a number of years. That was every whisper, every red flag, every pylon. I had the blinders on. I knew something was wrong. I think that I didn't really know how to stop. Like I didn't know how to just do the class workouts. I didn't know how to be just the person doing it. I kept always thinking, if I just have 1 week to recover, or one good weekend, then I could start the next week fresh. Like that was always in my mind. And at the time, I had a job where I worked actually at a corporate company for Schwarzkopf Professional. And so I visited schools and salons, and I taught as an educator for the brand, and I had a large territory. So you're driving all the time, you're doing shows on weekends, you're traveling a lot. So you're very stressed with your job. that you don't
Mm-hmm.
like. You
Mm-hmm.
live by yourself. And then to balance, because you don't like this, I decided, oh, I think it's going to be a great idea to do some online programming from this American coach in
Yeah.
California. This is going to be great. Fill your time up with that. And so, you know, not realizing in the moment, but emotionally I was already starting to be in a very sympathetic state. And
Mm-hmm.
then I went to the gym and trained for 2 to 4 hours, how many nights a week, and also coached. Let's not forget that, and now you're physically putting yourself in that sympathetic state all the time. There was never an off switch ever.
Wow. I mean, and what you learn, I can hear so much of like when you come through that experience and what you've learned having walked through the burnout cycle and come through to the other side. Like, are there things that you would be able to tell people about how to maybe start to recognize when you're headed towards that burnout? It's
Mm-hmm.
hard for people to see, and I can identify with your story a lot, but it's hard for people to recognize that they're headed towards burnout. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Especially as hard charging competitive people, we're really good at putting our head down and, grinding through stuff. But is there anything that you would say you would look for?
I mean, poor sleep habits and then constantly pushing through would probably be a major red flag for everybody. I think that would be a common thing with
Yeah.
any kind of a burnout. And even if it wasn't a burnout, but the poor sleep, we know that that's just a ripple effect into a disaster,
Yeah.
waiting to happen down the line. Yeah, just pushing it constantly and not taking the time. And even if that could be, I feel like people, even if they really weren't willing or able to see everything, even if it was something as simple as just pausing for one song, like in a car. Let's say they're in a meeting or whatever it is, and they're driving or leaving work or before going, whatever it is, like just something small. It could be, I think that there are small steps that people could take, and that could just be like, I'm just going to close my eyes and breathe for one song in the car before I go in, to this thing. Or just understanding, oh, hey, all those little injuries that you think that you have are injuries, it's maybe your body, you know, telling you. Because I know now, I mean, I could have always had a groin pull
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
a tweaked shoulder or something. But yet, when I'm now experiencing those types of signs or symptoms, except I wasn't squatting and I wasn't doing handstand push ups or dips, well, how did I pull my groin then? Walking. It's like,
Right.
or is your body holding on to something? And, so now I'm
Yes.
starting to see, like,
Yeah.
I took a car ride in July and I realized coming home, the event that I went to made me feel sick. The next day I felt sick. And then I had a groin pull for a couple weeks. I had to, great, now I
Yes.
have to work on that. And it's kind of like you just took a car ride and visited with people from the past. So what happened in that experience, in that day? What were the conversations?
Yes.
And
And the way that conscious and subconscious connects to our body. And sometimes when I totally agree with you on that, like when sometimes we don't have words for things or we haven't acknowledged something and it's going
mhm.
to come out somewhere. Right.
And now I'm able to see some of this stuff a little bit more clear because I don't have all the other external things. I'm not training for multiple hours a day, doing Olympic lifting and working on ring dips and muscle ups and blah, 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 all these kinds of things. So I don't have those as, because that would have been a good excuse. Well, you were doing ring dips, you did too many. You
Right.
should have stretched after. Well, no, now I don't have any of those things to blame or point the finger at. There's really only me. There's only me left. So
Yeah. That's super honest. I love it. Like, on your Instagram, you call yourself a conscious creator, and I can kind of hear that coming through this conversation, the way you're describing, how you look at your days now. Can you like walk me through that a little bit more and what that means to you to be a conscious
Sure.
creator?
Yeah, sure. I feel like a few months ago, it was probably during a meditation actually, or some breath work. And those words kind of kept coming to me, like create consciously, and it kind of like kept sticking, and it stuck with me. And so then I decided to put it in my bio because that, meant something to me. And ultimately I will work towards um, creating more of a platform which will then house my three interests, which would be coaching, writing, and creating art. And I think the idea really of the conscious creators, it doesn't mean we have to do a whole major overhaul of our life. Like that's not really always possible for most of us. You know,
Right.
it's happened to me where like I sold the gym and now this is wow, like that thing actually you sold it, you sold your house, you moved, you get to start something all over. What do you want it to be? But the idea, I think, a little bit more is just having a little bit more thought and intention behind even small, simple things that we're doing in the morning. And this idea kind of came to me also with it's like the seed that sort of started to go. I could see it starting to sprout where I was thinking, well, if you can't really do one tiny small thing every day, like let's say if it was something like eat an orange every day at breakfast, if you can't really commit to that, and I know it seems so small and insignificant, and most people are going to be like, not, I did it for 3 days, but you don't know the impact that that could have long term by doing it. And so we tend to want to only focus on the big huge things, like I'm going to clean out the fridge, I'm going to go get all new food and new Tupperware to create this whole new way of eating, that and I'm going to count these macros, and I'm going to use this app, and I'm going to get up, I'm going to work out these many days in a week. And these, well, can you go for a walk 5 minutes every day, for
Yeah.
5 minutes, not for 5 minutes every day? Because if you can do 5 minutes every day, there's no prize for skipping 4 days and then doing an hour. Because if you can't commit to doing 5 minutes or the one orange,
Yeah.
you can't maintain, these other things. And on that, to go just a little bit back to when you asked also one of the other results that I had seen with Brian,
Yeah.
I almost forget about this result, but I also had some nasal issues, and
Okay.
there was a lot of dryness, and I would get bloody noses every day. And so it became frustrating with me as I'm trying to do breath work, and I'm trying, of course, trying to be competitive with myself, following the programming, and I want to do this, whatever the protocol was. Um, and last year in August, so it's been well over a year, there were two other things that I started doing every single day. So although yes, breath work was one of them, I switched it to a certain type of pranayama where it was like a fast in and out through the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing was doing a lymph reset. Well, I continued doing those two things. That was it. That was the only two things that I changed. So it's like that sort of is the like accumulative effect of where this conscious creator, idea sort of was birthed, because I realized that I kept doing it when I saw no results. I kept doing it, and doing it. And finally, I realized it was like, oh, wow, no more bloody noses. That's interesting. Great. Also, great. Thank you. Now there's no more dryness and scabbing inside my nose. It's like gone.
Wow.
And I have this app that will record the sleep, and it would show that I had little snores, like my mouth was closed, but it would be
Okay.
these just very small little, like an inhale breath, and you could hear a bit of a snore. The
Mm-hmm.
last couple months, no snores, no snores, no scabbing. It's my left side here, completely fine. I have a deviated septum. I've known that for years. It's completely open and fine. And so it's like it's doing these two things when I didn't even see the results and I still kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And then finally one day, like you wake up and you're kind of like, oh, wow. You know what? I
Wow.
haven't had a bloody nose in months. Oh, wow. It's not
Oh,
dry. It's like a normal nose. And
I
but
think, yeah, that's what I love about what Brian and Emily teach and do, because
mhm,
what we don't realize today is that I mean, everyone's out there, we're all looking for the quick
that
fix,
quick
and like
fix.
what they do is not a quick fix, but it is so foundational and fundamental that we look up and the world looks different and our body feels different and our relationships change and it's all connected. But you just
Mhm,
threw it back right just to that, to the simple consistency that it takes to be any kind of a champion. And whether that's, I'm a big believer that most people want to perform at a high level in something, right?
mhm,
But if we don't have those foundational, very simple, like, I talk to Olympians and they're like, yeah, they don't think about hydration. They don't think about breath because they've been trained to do all these things. And that's what you're getting at, is that
mhm,
consistency that changes and shifts the little things that all of a sudden you don't even realize have added up to something that is a massive shift in your health, and then everything goes from there, right? I mean, sleep
mhm.
being at the foundation, and when we can't, people don't realize when they don't breathe right, they're not sleeping well, and everything stems from there, right?
We're on a
Vicious
merry-go-round
cycle.
of yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
So that's
Hmm.
fascinating. And I would love to see some of those protocols for what those two things, because I think that's something that plagues a lot of people. And I mean, from deviated septum to, snoring, to things that interfere with sleep, that people don't realize that the fix can be something so natural. And yes, you have to be consistent, but wow. It's,
Hmm.
it's
And
that's
people would probably think, well, didn't you go to the ENT? Yes, yes, I did see him a couple times. It was very unhelpful. Gave me a
wow.
cream for my nose. Cream, like thanks, thank
Mm,
you. Like, um, and
yeah.
although he did send me for a CAT scan as well, or CT, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fine. I
And of
did
course,
those
you want
things.
to know that something huge is not wrong. I mean, and people, I never tell
Sure. Yes. So
people
I
not to.
certainly, yeah, I certainly took that path. My nurse practitioner set me up and I had an appointment with the specialist. I saw him a couple times. He wasn't really that helpful, but he did in the end say that he did not think that I was a candidate for surgery. He explained why, which I was totally cool with because, well, thank you. Like, I don't want you to do it and then risk having nerve damage due to the way my septum looked. But I already knew that I had a deviated septum because I had my tonsils out at 21. So that was like, I already knew that. And I also knew that I had logically lived with no nose problems or no pain. The
Mhm.
deviated septum did not cause me issues in life. It
Yeah.
didn't.
Okay.
Like I didn't get headaches. I didn't have any jaw pain. There was no other issues. It was just sinus issues. And then
Okay.
over the last couple of years, this now specific nasal issue that did not change regardless of whether or not I went on vacation or took
Mhm.
out foods. Like I did all the things. I tried, and when I say I tried all the things, I don't mean I did it for 3 days, like months no dairy or months no gluten or no this or no that, like, so
Yeah.
I had felt like I had exhausted a lot of the things and done them numerous times over.
Right.
And hey, you know what, it could have also just maybe been my body's like a stress response. There's that as well, but there was
Yeah.
no answer, ultimately from
Yeah.
them. So it was, you
So
know
yeah. So you were moving through all of these things, and then being, coaching with Brian, or being coached by Brian through as the pandemic
mhm.
hit, and then through that summer, and you had just made the move, and you and I kind of, we've connected on some of the changes and shifts that we've seen in ourselves and in the world as we've progressed through this pandemic. um
Mhm.
and you actually alluded to some of those things being positive, and I'm wondering if, let's talk about that, how you made that move, and what were some of the more challenging things about coming through the pandemic as you made that move, and then what were some of the positive things?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think having more tools in the toolbox to help like navigate all of these situations was, I don't even think there's really words for that, because really, and to be constantly doing that, I think it was probably good in some ways because it gave me something else to focus on. Like, remember, you're working on this week, or even if it was just something as simple as that, like coming back to, remember, you're working on this week. You wanted to, you're catching yourself in real time, do this or say this, or don't get wrapped up here. Because it's certainly, I think, in everywhere in Canada or the US, there's a lot of, whether it's mainstream media or it's not mainstream media that you're following, and people hearing this, reading this, uh, being on different pages, or whatever the thing is, you're kind of like feeling like, I felt like I was always trying to like navigate, where everybody was, and be able to have discussions without it being, arguments, certainly. So I
Mm-hmm.
think really having the skills to sometimes just pause and have a breath before I'm jumping into a response, whereas years prior I would have been very quick tongued and very, you know, um,
Yeah.
outspoken.
Okay.
Like that would be more my personality, to be a little more outspoken in
Uh-huh.
general. And so now it's kind of like, oh, okay, maybe, not to say totally bite your tongue on every single thing, but really like, let's just listen to the other person a little bit more, perhaps taking a little bit more time. And so that has been a little bit more helpful. And I think also where having the tools can become helpful, because then I guess it's like, well, but if I can navigate something a little bit better, then maybe my better chosen responses or actions might have a ripple effect towards the other people as well, right? Not trying to be like, well, guys, I do mentorship and I'm doing this, so you should do it too. So not being like that, but it is, again, I like to be the coach. So if I can do it and I quietly do it, does that in turn have a bit of a ripple effect to the others around me? Or, not responding on something and a couple days later saying, hey, I was thinking when we were talking the other day, and for me, I think I might just do this, or I might, and just kind of do it a different way. It's like I've noticed that there's probably been a little bit more thought process for other people around me as I've perhaps introduced my own new thought processes to things. So,
Yeah, and that makes sense. And when you think about it in the realm of, as Brian and Emily call it, the window of tolerance, and expanding that window of tolerance to be able to take in other opinions or other stressful situations, or being, locked down in a new town by yourself, or whatever it is that's
mm-hmm,
stressful that's hitting you. And then these tools that shift brings into life, that allows us to widen our window of tolerance and just, respond. It sounds like that's kind of what you're hitting on. um
mm-hmm.
and yeah, I'm really curious as to how long did you work through the entire lockdown, and how did that go up there for you guys? What was your daily life like?
So I would say really it was, I guess a nice word for myself would be to say it was like a sabbatical
Okay.
after really the selling of the gym. Then really I was only home for a few months, at the end of 2019. Then March rolls around, so now everything's closed. So anything like any type of coaching or anything, I would say into 2020, I physically wasn't well enough to do anything. That's really how I would have felt. It was more like now you're hitting like rock bottom of your, of the way you're feeling. Like, yes, I'm sleeping better, but they're still now having to process, excuse me, everything that I went through, and all those emotions and, relationships lost with the whole situation. So 2020, 2021, that was sort of like a rock bottom. So most of things were in Ontario. I guess I won't speak for all of the other areas, but in a lot of Ontario, businesses were closed for months on end, restaurants takeout only for months and months, even as things in the States opened. Then when they did open, you had to show papers that you're vaccinated to go into them. Then it went back down to another lockdown again. And, so it really almost didn't matter which side of the, belief fence that you wanted to be, or, ultimately all of that happened to everybody. So it kind of felt like, so how am I going to what am I going to create now? Because you can't do anything in person. There were many people in, I would say, definitely our area. I don't even know if people would have felt comfortable doing an outside group class in a neighborhood, in case a neighbor down the street might think that's not right. They shouldn't be outside exercising in a group of 4 or 6. So there was just really, you just didn't know, where everybody was, and you're trying to sort of like tiptoe a little bit, and maintain relationships. But ultimately, for me personally and some of my family, getting cut out. And I think that now, as more and more time has come through, taken some other courses throughout this time, the whole idea with the conscious creator is then to be able to create a platform for myself where, well, before we didn't know about these Zoom calls, and now look, here you and I are today. Not only did we connect through the mentorship group, we get to do this. So it is a pretty cool thing.
Yes.
Now, in hindsight, that we can, do these types of things and connect with people all over. So I think that will be more the direction then that I can move to.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this chat as much as I am. For more great content, courses, and lifestyle, go to bebettermedia.tv. I totally agree with you. I can get super frustrated with social media sometimes and just think like, gosh, what it's doing to, creating comparison and showing the highlight reel and what it's doing to our attention spans. But then I think when you get people who really are consciously going through life, I can't believe that the types of people that I've met and made friendships with they're different than me a lot of ways, but like minds and available because of the miles not being a difference, and I think in so many ways, for all the ways that the world is trying to paint us, or the media is trying to paint us into these different corners and tell us how we're all different, these kind of conversations are the ones that I love, because I think they show us how much we actually have in common. And across a border, or from different political viewpoints, or different races, or sexual orientations, or whatever it is that they're trying to pinpoint us on, and go, yeah, we are maybe all of those things, but when it comes down to it, we can have these conversations. And it goes back to the tools, because when we're able to come down and relax and widen that window of tolerance through things like meditation and breath work and Emily's neuro nidra and the things that have totally changed the way I respond to life, I'm so inspired. And people don't realize how much, like they say, your biology becomes your psychology, and then how our relationships are built out of that. And I'm so grateful for the way that I understand that now. And, I feel like so many people are, there's so many great ideas out there, but like getting them out there and marketing them, and, people don't do it for their own attention. People like Brian and Emily, like what I'm so struck by, and even you and the people in our group, is, man, there's just some great minds, but everybody's just going about their day, and it's like, how do we grab onto each other and create this awareness that we have, that we are so powerful with our breath and our sleep and our nutrition. And I feel like a lot of that got lost in COVID, because we started concentrating on I don't know, things that just we weren't concentrating on the things that were keeping us healthy, and we were talking so much just
Mm-hmm.
about vaccines. And this is where, I get kind of heated because I'm like, okay, everybody can think what they want, but at the base, like, what are we doing to be healthier people and build healthier relationships? You know?
Right. And
And some of
locking
those,
people down and telling them not to exercise, or, people can't go into parks or things like that. You're like, well, so
yeah,
don't go for a walk. Don't
yeah,
get any exercise. None?
yeah,
None?
exactly. So
Yeah.
it's nice to think that we have come through some of that stuff right now. And I know that your life was changed a lot. I mean, saying you were right on the border, what was that like, being right on the border? And like, before the pandemic, did you cross? I mean, did you cross a lot, and did that change, during and after the pandemic?
Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. And so both of my neighbors on the one side of our house here, she's a nurse at Henry Ford, which is a big hospital in Michigan. He's a truck driver. I have lots of friends that drive truck, and they cross the border all the time. So whether or not they're, because this area there's a lot of tool and die shops. So auto industry in Windsor is very connected to the auto industry in the States as well. So a lot of people doing that kind of stuff, nurses, all kinds of different businesses. Now, because I had actually been living away for 8 years closer to Toronto, I'll use my brother and sister-in-law. Yes, they went to the States all the time. You know,
Okay. Yeah.
football games, hockey games, the Tigers, just zipping over to go have dinner, things like that. You could order things and then have it shipped to the mailbox over there and pick it up. So they would do things like that all the time. Detroit Metro from my house right now is probably a 45-minute drive from my door to Detroit Metro.
Wow.
But then the border closed and had been closed. That's the longest land border in the world. It's the longest border. It's been closed. And so even as of today, if you do not have your shots, you're not supposed to be crossing the border into the United States. That's
Yeah.
like still you can come into Canada though now. We dropped it. So but yeah, so it did change things, because then you're thinking, well, I'm not going to drive 4 hours to Toronto to fly out. That's silly when Metro's right
Ah,
here. So that stopped a lot of people from crossing. We also have a casino here in Windsor in our city. So you get a lot of Americans coming for dinner to a lot of nice restaurants and things, and spending their US dollars at the casino. Well, then nobody's coming. And
yeah.
so I think a huge impact on, and probably, yeah, once again, probably for people in Michigan or for us here in Ontario, oh, at the borders. Like, I mean, sure, if maybe you lived in Iowa, you don't really think about it, right? Because you're in the Midwest or something, so it's not as much of a concern. And I'm sure same as if they live in Toronto, they're not thinking about it because they don't live there, but they don't feel that same impact. But it was definitely, I think, a noticeable
Yeah,
change.
because it was part of your lifestyle, and your small businesses are,
Hmm.
ingrained with people from both sides of the border. And it's ironic that we're having this conversation today on election day, and I dropped my
Yes,
my ballot off before I headed in here to talk to you. And
good.
it really, I mean, I've always been, a conscious capitalist, and a conscious voter, and I educate myself, and I think that that's really important. But man,
Hmm.
through all of this, like, how the little things matter. And I've really been bothered by, not just by political parties and the way they break down, but by the culture of elitism, that
Hmm.
certain people know better than others, and having certain, opinions pushed because, there's either financial gain involved, or there's a big corporation that has, why could we go to Target, but the guy who risked life and limb to open his business, whether it was a gym or a restaurant, and now he can't feed his family. Like, all through those
Right.
things, I got very frustrated with but I could just as easily get sick if I go to Target, but somehow they can be open. And so I started asking all of these questions, and then you and I, I read my Wall Street Journal and I throw things up on my story just because I like to see the conversation that comes back and see what other people are thinking. And whether it's natural resources or conscious capitalism or healthcare or the things that are really big things that are going on in America, and same for in Canada, you and I started connecting on those things, and it just makes me really curious as to how, like, in a global culture, we all fit together, and
yeah it is. I think it's such a good question, and I think that sometimes maybe our two countries, because we're so connected, right? And so I think sometimes it's probably easy for many Americans and many Canadians who don't live near the border to not think about, in a way, what's happening in another person's country, because you do feel like, oh, it's another country. Now, perhaps because I've traveled to the States so many times, I've done a lot of courses and seminars in the States, so I've connected with a lot of Americans, and then continue to stay connected to them. So I do feel more in tuned to, like, your election, the midterms today, things like that, what's going on, who's different candidates, and different things going on. Yeah, I think it's easy for people to get really just, I think, wrapped up in their own daily lives, which I can totally understand. I mean, imagine throughout all of this, you're a parent with a 2 and a 5-year-old, and you got one in daycare. Like, you
it
don't
just gives me the
care
chills.
about crap on whether it's mainstream media or it's not mainstream media. What you're like, I don't have time because I got to get dinner on the table, and I've got a meeting at this time, or then I got a crap load of laundry to do, and then I got to get bath this one and get, so that they can hurry up and go to bed to hurry up and do their whole day, all over again.
All over.
Right. So they're really only consumed with the minutia of their life, but which overtakes their whole entire life. There's not really time to read about, I wonder how this works, or wow, so how does this, because our voting system here is different, much different. But like, who wants to, like, no one's having the time to, how does this work? Or, wow, I don't really know a lot about this subject. Let me see if I could follow a new person on social media that might have information that goes against my beliefs. Might I change my beliefs, or might I learn something new? Like, most people don't want to do that. It's easy. It's like but then that's what social media is meant to do for us, right? Like, catch us in the trap, and you're down the rabbit hole, and it's going to keep showing you things that you love to see. So
yeah I would so love to change that. Like, that is something I've thought about for a long time. It's just like, what if instead of being sent down the rabbit hole, you were fed, you had access to the other side, the other opinion, and then also had the ability to regulate long enough to listen and take in another opinion, because I think that's so much of what we've gotten away from. And it's sad to me, because that's definitely not how I grew up, and it's definitely where we are in America today. And I don't know how you feel about Canada, but do you feel like, are you guys more divided up there than you?
Oh, it's very divided.
Yeah,
very divided. And actually, there's different things, of course, happening in different provinces, just the way there would be, in different states there. A friend of mine, maybe 2 weeks ago, she had told me, so she's in BC, and her mother was in the hospital, and she was not allowed to go into the hospital because she did not have her shots. And then they were supposed to be looking for a home for her mom, and she couldn't go in the home because she didn't have her shots. And I was actually shocked, because I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize that was still going on in BC. Like, I didn't realize that restriction had not been lifted for you, because it has been lifted here. However, she also did a way better job than me, let's say, in not consuming information. Right. So I
Mhm.
completely consumed information and then started reading about all kinds of new things that I never would have been interested in before or wanted to learn about. And now I realized, oh, you can't, yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
you can't
where,
really have an opinion about something that you don't know anything about anymore. That's just not, it's not going to fly. So you need to either take the time to learn a little bit about some of these things to be able to ask some questions and then make a decision, or like,
yeah, yeah. Do you
yeah,
have an opinion on where that line kind of lies? Because we can overconsume and make ourselves crazy, or we can
yeah.
be we can go the other route and be so apathetic that we have no idea what's going on. Did you find a way to kind of regulate yourself over time, or
Yes, it took quite some time. I would say probably after our convoy that we had
mm,
in the beginning of 2022, which for a, not certainly not for most Canadians, but for a few of us, my sister and I were chatting about this the other day, that really felt, like I could almost cry thinking about it right now. That felt like a beacon of light, like a moment of hope, like, yeah, like something, is happening. It almost felt, I always feel like Americans do everything up, like Fourth of July, like a baseball game. It's
yeah,
fireworks. It's very grandiose. I love it. But like it's big. It's always doing it big. And then when this was happening, it really felt like this is big. This is a big thing, and Americans are proud of the Canadians doing this thing. So, but I realized, as that uh, went on, and then it ended, poorly with, people getting trampled by the horses, all kinds of things. It's like, okay, it's being spun into a new light, and now that's not the beacon of light anymore. And I think after that, and then by March was a for sure turning point for me because I lost a pet. And it was just like, whoa, like put the brakes on. The, the convoy didn't turn out. I lost my pet. And it was like, I can't keep consuming this information because it's not making me feel better. I'm not starting a new business. I'm not actually doing anything. What am I doing? Now I'm going to be an expert on negativity,
yeah,
an expert on things nobody wants to talk about, just my family, my immediate family. So that was a real turning point for me of, how does this serve you? Like, this is consuming that much is not serving you. However, it's still okay to inform yourself. So I think I probably at that point probably maybe changed direction a little bit. Maybe there were some different podcasts that I might have listened to, and where I would say I started actively looking for new sources of information. Some of these people they couldn't probably be further like from the things that I know about. They're all former military people, and they all had been very high level military. Some of them very specially trained by your government, and it was like, okay, wow, like this dude really has a lot of information. Or they also might do some civilian tactical training or survival skills, or could I learn something from this? Even though some of it felt like, oh, I don't know anything about that. It's like,
hmm,
but do they have anything to offer me, to think a different way, or could I learn a little bit about it?
yeah,
To the point that I actually went and got my firearms. I did the firearms safety course, and that was a very big deal for me. But also, again, it's like, well, how can you keep saying guns are bad or this is bad if you can't even tell the difference between one or the other? You don't even know
yeah,
it. So you could learn
yeah.
learn and then and then
Have
make
an
a more
informed,
informed
yeah, an
decision.
informed opinion. Yeah, and regardless of how that opinion comes out, you have at least taken the time to know something. more
Mm-hmm.
intimately than you did before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
That was a
fascinating.
scary thing for me to
Oh,
do,
I can,
really.
yeah, and I can totally relate to that because I mean, growing up as an American and, having family members that have, hunted or had different relationships with guns, and then seeing the problem with mental health and the every time you see a shooting or like it's so gut-wrenching and heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard not to ask the question, and quite frankly, but there's so
Mm-hmm.
much that goes into it, from our Second Amendment to the training to screenings and mental health, and how are we treating loneliness or depression, or so many of the things that come in to get involved. But at the base of it, if you've never held a gun, if you've never
Mm-hmm.
it's hard you actually don't have an informed opinion. And I am not saying I'm not trained and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not comfortable. I have family members that are, and I feel I actually really respect that process that you just said you walked through, because I
Mm-hmm.
haven't done that for myself. And it's something in the last few years that I've really thought about, because as a very peaceful, calm, like, my demeanor is very much just, I just want to say it's not for me,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a real dialogue out there that matters. It matters to Americans because it's so based in where we came from. And I think
Mm-hmm.
often that, you know, we get pulled off course by so many of the different, the gun lobby, the crime, and all of the things that hit us every day. But at the base of it, there's a real value system that is, it's being attacked and assaulted on so many levels that it's hard to get a clear dialogue on how people can come together on that issue that is so fraught with so much pain, and
Yes. Yeah.
protection for ourselves. So it really is a big issue. And I how you got to that, and had the courage to walk through it on your own and form your own opinion, like, my hat's off to you, because a lot of people don't do that, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and even, I mean, just then, even that one little issue aside, I think it certainly brought to light for me. Well, I guess because I had done it, and then I understood the process. Because whether I think many Canadians might be very naive to how this, like, I don't know how people think that you just get a gun. I mean,
Yeah.
well, criminals, are we talking criminals, or are we talking you and me? Because
Right. Yeah, I'm a rule
it's not
follower. I follow.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You give
Yeah.
me a
So,
law and I follow it, which was part of
there's
the problem
laws,
with
and
COVID for me.
yeah, there's steps. So, but I mean, just because we put some words on a piece of paper, there's not a criminal somewhere going, oh, yeah, dude, yeah, we're not doing it now. They changed that law. It's on paper now. I mean, they're not, no one,
Right.
that's not happening, right? So, um, like, then I wish they would make a law against drinking and driving. Oh, there is. Oh, there is. Oh, but people, and I think so.
Right.
After I had gone through the process myself and saw how lengthy it was, and how many RCMP checks that you have to have and that you get before getting the piece of paper which allows you to go to the store to purchase something, and then purchasing a shotgun or rifle is much different than doing a handgun, which is also a different course. And if you didn't do that course, you cannot purchase that at a store, and then you had to wait to get the permission to be able to transport it home. So it was weeks and months before the actual license came in the mail. It was about 5 months before that even came. So just even seeing how the process went has made me develop new questions in any of these types of scenarios. So, not certainly not to ever downplay a shooting scenario. It's horrific. It's terrible, whether it's on our side or your side of the border, anywhere
Right.
in the world. It's very horrific. But I then started to realize, I think, well, a lot of the questions that I'm hearing when they're sort of directed to one side of the story or situation, all of those questions or statements or opinions probably could be inversely replied or applied as well,
Yeah.
and not just the gun issue. So,
Yep.
all the issues, all the topics that we're dealing with, today. And then, I mean, because then, so Canada for sure uh, supported the Ukraine. Okay, fine. So regardless of having that other whole conversation, but we sent them firearms.
Yeah.
So you're giving unlicensed and untrained people firearms, but yet you want to take them, like, so there's no logic to me in that. It's so why is it okay for some lady there to have it, or some 15-year-old kid?
Yeah.
Why is that okay?
Right.
Oh, it's because they're in war and we're not in Canada here. It's like, it just made me started to ask me a little, like, look at things far differently than I never would have asked these questions before. I never would have, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, prior to 2020, I mean, when I was I was like too busy coaching, too busy training, too busy
Yeah.
doing everything else and not really asking any of these questions. And
Wow.
it's
Yeah, I mean that really does
eye-opening.
capture that really does to me capture that conscious creator, because I think what you're hitting on is that awareness. If you have the ability and you make the time to have the awareness on any number of these issues, and by that, I just think that's how the world is getting better. If we have more people that can ask these questions and have these conversations, then we are creating better spaces and better relationships. And that gives me hope for all the days that I read things, and it is easy to get discouraged, but these kind of
Mhm.
conversations and what I want to create, that's so much what is behind it, are these types of
Yeah.
conversations that create understanding.
Hmm.
I just
Well, and actually, it's funny because I noticed. So you had made a post today about what was something. It was like there's the two sides of, or two differences of, but of the coin.
oh, truth and
It's
perspective.
the
Yeah,
truth
truth
and
and
perspective.
perspective are
Yes,
two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
yes, and it reminds me of a little saying that two things can be true at the same time, and and just sometimes looking at that, the fact that, because and I know this is of course hard to say, and I've probably struggled with this many times as well, but feelings are not necessarily facts. And so just because we feel like guns are this or that, or this politician is this or that, or this law or rule, it's like, well, but feelings aren't facts. And so then when I took the time to take that course, which, like, I practically cried having to touch anything, doing, like, I never had touched a firearm before. I don't know how to, a
Chills.
bullet, a cartridge, what's the proper words. It felt like, so it was completely foreign to me. I might as well have been taking a course in a different language. That's what it felt like to me, the whole 3 days that I did the courses. And but I mean, just because you don't want something to be true, or you don't like something, it doesn't mean it's not true. Doesn't,
Right.
if we can't take the time to educate ourselves or learn about a thing, disliking it doesn't make it less true, doesn't make it not there. And I think for me, having to look at a lot of, other whatever facts, so whether it's learning about the government, or how this party works, or how does our voting system truly work, oh, what do I like about it, what don't I like about it, just taking the time to learn some of these things. Okay, all right, like, you know what, maybe I don't have to really like or dislike something. I could just be a little bit neutral, or I could like this aspect here, but I could also like this aspect
Yeah.
over here.
Not an
I don't
it's
know.
not
Just
yeah, it's not an all or nothing proposition, or just because you
mhm.
believe one thing about this doesn't mean that you can't believe, you don't,
Right.
like, all issues aren't the same, right? I mean, they so often they want to put everybody on one platform. So if you're liberal, or you're conservative, you're Republican or Democrat down here, you must believe all these things. Well, most people aren't like that, from what I find.
Right.
We
On either
believe
side.
all
On either
kinds of
side.
things. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I love these conversations, because you do find people all the time that, you know, believe one thing about guns, and another thing about global warming, and another thing about, right to life. And there are so many issues that affect us as human beings. But the more that we can talk about them calmly, the more we learn about each other, the more we build better relationships. And it's so much more important than, ratings and advertising and what the world. And that's why I love the podcast world so much, is because I think these long form conversations really do create understanding in a way that isn't being done in a lot of the mainstream advertised driven media. So
I think also to probably even add to that, because you had mentioned before about the tolerance, the window of tolerance a number of times. And I guess it's like when I think of some of these people, not, and I don't mean to say this from, I'm not trying to sound judgmental or finger point about what someone else should be doing. But I suppose pushing the boundaries, if you did that from an athletic standpoint, or I mean, for crying out loud, then I did CrossFit for a decade or more, willingly, like, why would you want to rip your hands like that, right? Why would you, why, what, so things like this. But it's because I wanted to push myself and see where I could physically go. Like, well, how much more was in the tank, or what is my potential as a human? Animals will always, meet and live to their full potential. Like, they will run as fast as they possibly can, or they will, jump or do all of these things. Humans don't always do that. I guess I see when people, the moment we can practice pushing the boundaries on the tolerance of the window, but I think that you can also a little bit of a use it or lose it, where when people slowly stop doing those things, stop doing anything that, well, I went for a bike ride and then my shoulder hurt after, and so my shoulder must be from riding the bike, so I'm going to stop riding the bike. But you could walk, or did
right.
you have maybe a different type of recumbent bike at home or the gym or something? No. Let's just stop all the things. So I think, as like a lot of society, also, it's things are just set up in a way to strive for comfort. And certainly I think we're wired for that as well, like path of least resistance, right? So now you have to override that. And so I think when people are not willing to do it physically, they start also not wanting to do it mentally as
Yes.
well.
I
There's
think
just,
that's such a good point. That is such a good point. And it brings up for me, like I've studied a lot about flow and just how to find flow, right, in life. Like you felt it in sports, but we get it in life. I found it in parenting. I found it in writing, and what I learned, one of the best things I learned about it is that the challenge skills balance, where you properly challenge yourself for the skill level you have, and you can keep challenging up as you increase your skills, and you at that intersection you will find flow more often. And what you're describing is, yes, absolutely, like you don't want to over challenge yourself and cause yourself all kinds of anxiety, but when you don't challenge yourself, you don't reach your potential, you don't find your flow, you don't find your purpose. And that's just, for me, that's not what life is. Our lives are so much better when we're challenging that challenge skills balance and finding our purpose. And so and that's what I love about, connecting with people like you. And when you look for people, when you find Brian's and Emily's and the people that are really in their element, that's what happens. And these relationships are created with people that are striving to be better. And that's where my concept came from. It's just like, it is little tiny things every day that challenge us a little bit more and more to be better. And I love having these conversations and connecting with people that I would never have found had I not gotten curious, right? And met. So I just want to, my favorite question to ask people, and I think I hope I prepped you for it, but is, the podcast was really created to be a generational learning platform. And my question that I love to ask is, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, I love that question. So when I was thinking about that, I remember a moment, and it must have happened to me, I would say about 3 times specifically. Once probably in high school, it was sort of like a vision that I had. And then it happened again, probably early 20s. And then maybe it kind of got refined or something. And so what I would tell myself is first of all, I would probably, if I could go back to that age, I think it was high school, when I had that little vision, I would want to go back to myself maybe a week or two later or something and kind of say, you know, that vision that you just had, like you're right. That feeling, that gut feeling, because so what it was a feeling of, well, why couldn't I, like, I would like to own a business and create jewelry. And I always kind of fancied myself as a writer. I always thought that would be cool. So it was like, it felt like I thought that there was, whether you want to call it a bucket list, or I thought, what if there was a set amount of things that you, Wendy, wanted to do, but that I also wanted to do? And in order for me to feel my own personal sense of fulfillment, I need to do these things that I once said I wanted to do. I mean, otherwise, if you don't, you have a life of regret, or whatever. And so I wish I could, if I could, what I would want to say to myself is go back to that girl in high school and tell her, your idea, this little thing that came to you, you're right. That's it. You the you will find happiness much quicker when you do these things. Or you can spend years and years denying it, pretending it's not there.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean it's not true, goes back to the two things can be true. And really to kind of let myself know that I was going to constantly be needing to switch into, like, I think we're all going to move into new versions of ourselves, but to tell myself, you need to create multiple versions of yourself. You have lots of interests, and other people's path in your little hometown is not your path. Their path isn't your path. So it's okay that everyone else doesn't have the same interests. You might feel like a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't matter. You're a generator. I'm a generator.
Oh,
I would
very
tell
good.
myself, you're a
Okay.
generator.
I
And
love human design. I love
yes,
it. We'll have to talk about that some other day because I'm a
yeah, sounds
projector,
good.
by the way. So
Okay.
yeah, it's
So
good stuff.
tell myself, you're a generator. People feel drawn to you when you are creating ideas, and you need to create all the things that you want to do. And probably the biggest or most important thing is to tell myself, do them all. Do them. Don't listen to the other people who aren't doing it. Don't
Beautiful.
ask the people for the directions where they're not going. They're not going to the same destination. So ignore them all. You know what you know. Your gut is right, and go with it.
God, I love that. There's a lot of power in those words. So
Yeah.
that's an awesome thing to end on, and you just gave me the chills
Mm-hmm.
again. So, um, if people want to find you to connect to what you're doing, what's the best place to find you?
I think probably Instagram, and it's just at Naffele Nikita.
Okay,
And
we'll make
so
sure.
it's an open profile. Yep, picture of
Oh,
me. So,
awesome.
and most things that I post are there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll make sure
Mm-hmm.
that gets in the show notes. And
Okay.
this is such a great conversation, and I
Yes, I
hope
really enjoyed it.
we'll continue this. So, but thank you so much for your time today, and I'm sure we'll connect again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to What I Meant to Say. If you enjoyed this conversation, you know what to do. Subscribe, rate, review. And for more great content, courses, and lifestyle, go to BeBetterMedia.tv.